made the rupture complete. From that year until the death of the king, father and son were enemies. Louis began his rebellious career by a futile attempt to seduce the cities of Agenais into treason, and then he prepared a plot to seize the king and his minister Pierre de Brézé. Antoine de Chabannes, who was to be the instrument of the plot, revealed it to Charles, and Louis was mildly punished by being sent off to Dauphiné in 1447. He never saw his father again. Louis set out to govern his principality as though it were an independent state. He dismissed the governor, he determined advantageously to himself the boundaries between his state and the territories of the Duke of Savoy and of the papacy, and he enforced his authority over perhaps the most unruly nobility in Western Europe, both lay and ecclesiastical. The right of private warfare was abolished. The bishops were obliged to give up most of their temporal jurisdiction, the scope of their courts was limited, and appeals to Rome were curtailed. On the other hand, Louis granted privileges to the towns and consistently used their alliance to overthrow the nobility. He watched the roads, built new ones, opened markets, protected the only bankers of the country, the Jews, and reorganized the administration so as to draw the utmost revenue possible from the prosperity thus secured. His ambition led him into foreign entanglements. He made a secret treaty with the Duke of Savoy, which was to give him right of way to Genoa, and made arrangements for a partition of the Duchy of Milan. The alliance with Savoy was sealed by the marriage of Louis with Charlotte, daughter of Duke Lodovico, in 1452, in spite of the formal prohibition of Charles VII. The king marched south, but withdrew again, leaving his son unsubdued. 4 years later, as Charles came to the Bourbonnais, Louis, fearing for his life, fled to Flanders to the court of Philip the Good, Duke of Burgundy, leaving Dauphiné to be definitively annexed to the crown of France. The policy of the Dauphin was reversed. His 10 years' work was undone. Meanwhile, he was installed in the castle of Genappe in Brabant, where he remained until the death of his father. For this he waited impatiently 5 years, keeping himself posted by spies of every stage of the king's last illness, and thus laying himself open to the accusation, believed in by Charles himself, that he had hastened the end by poison, a charge which modern historians deny. On the 15th of August 1461, Louis was anointed in Reims, and Philip of Burgundy, as doyen of the peers of France, placed the crown on his head. For 2 months, Philip acted as though the king were still his protégé. But in the midst of the festivities with which he was entertaining Paris, the Duke found that Louis ventured to refuse his candidates for office, and on the 24th of September, the new king left abruptly for Touraine. His first act was to strike at the faithful ministers of Charles VII. Pierre de Brézé and Antoine de Chabannes were captured and imprisoned, as well as men of sterling worth like Étienne Chevalier. But the king's shrewdness triumphed before long over his vengeance, and the more serviceable of the officers of Charles VII were for the most part soon reinstated. Louis's advisers were mostly men of the middle class. He had a ready purse for men of talent, drawing them from England, Scotland, Italy, Spain, and Portugal. Such a motley throng of competent men had never before been seen at the court of France. Their origin, their previous crimes or virtues, their avarice or brutality were indifferent to him so long as they served him loyally. Torture and imprisonment awaited them, whether of high or low degree, if he fancied that they were betraying him. Among the most prominent of these men, in addition to Brézé, Chevalier, and Chabannes, were Tristan l'Hermite, Jean de Daillon, Olivier le Dain, the barber, and after 1472, Philippe de Comines, drawn from the service of Charles the Bold of Burgundy, who became his most intimate adviser and biographer. Surrounded by men like these, Louis fought the last great battle of French royalty with feudalism.